I don't usually talk about my family much. Not because we're private, but because every time I do, someone tries to one-up my misery with, "Oh, you think your family's bad? But I'm telling you, mine is the kind of toxic that doesn't scream in your face or throw dishes across the room. No, my family specializes in something worse. Backhanded comments, passive-aggressive smirks, and the kind of manipulation you don't even realize is happening until you're halfway home and suddenly wondering why you feel like garbage." My name's Tyler, I'm 29, and I've spent most of my adult life trying to keep a healthy distance between me and the people who raised me. But as you'll see, sometimes, no matter how far you run, the past catches up, in a suit, with a fake smile, and holding a wine glass at Thanksgiving dinner. For context, I work in legal consulting, specifically with early-stage startups. I help them avoid lawsuits, or sometimes, I'm brought in after the damage has already been done. I keep things low-key. I don't brag, I don't bring my work into family gatherings, and most of the time, I don't even correct people when they assume I'm still working at that one law firm I interned with 6 years ago. Why? Because the second someone in my family thinks you're doing too well, you become a target. A punching bag. A story they get to rewrite to suit their version of events. Take my cousin Lila, for instance. She and I were inseparable when we were kids, built pillow forts together, made up dumb songs on road trips, shared everything. But once we hit our 20s and I started moving up while she seemed to stall out, something shifted. She got bitter, snippy. Every interaction started feeling like a test I didn't know I was taking. But still, I tried. I went to her birthdays, sent holiday cards, even helped her edit her resume once. That was my mistake, thinking effort would earn me goodwill. Last Thanksgiving, I was debating skipping the family dinner altogether. It had been a rough couple of months, long hours, a few tough cases, not a lot of sleep. But Mom guilt-tripped me in her usual way. "You never make time for family anymore," she said over the phone, her voice coated in that disappointed tone she's mastered over the years. Lila's bringing her new boyfriend. Everyone's excited to meet him. I should have known that was code for this is going to be a circus, and you're the unwitting main act. So I showed up, brought a bottle of wine. Nothing fancy, just enough to avoid questions. The dinner was at my aunt and uncle's house, like always. Big oak dining table, mismatched chairs, fake candles flickering even though the overhead lights were already blinding. Everyone was there. My mom, of course, Aunt Carol and Uncle Mark, who've always looked like they stepped out of a 90s family sitcom, but act like they're auditioning for a reality show called Petty and Proud. My younger brother Jake, who mostly stays quiet unless someone brings up cryptocurrency. And Lila, seated proudly next to a guy I'd never seen before, smiling like she just won the lottery. "This is Brandon," she announced as I walked in. "He founded this app that helps small businesses connect with investors. He's kind of a big deal." I smiled politely, nodded, shook his hand. He had the kind of grip that's more performance than connection. Firm, but with no warmth behind it. He was dressed sharp, like he wanted to be mistaken for a CEO at all times. Navy blazer, expensive-looking watch, loafers with no socks. And from the second I sat down, I could feel it. He had something to prove. The first jab came before we even started eating. We were making small talk about cities we'd traveled to, and I mentioned a client trip I took to San Francisco. Brandon grinned across the table and said, "Oh, I love when lawyers pretend they're entrepreneurs. It's cute, just like that. No wink, no smile to soften it. Just a hit delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who's used to people laughing along." And they did. Aunt Carol let out this little snort. Uncle Mark chuckled. Even my mom gave this tight-lipped smile like, "He's not wrong, Tyler." I swallowed it. I've learned not to react. You react, you give them fuel. Later, while we passed around the mashed potatoes, Brandon started talking about his company. His tone had that smug tilt I've come to associate with guys who think being the loudest in the room means they're the smartest. "We're revolutionizing the small business space," he declared. "Nobody's doing what we're doing. We've already raised 2 rounds, and next year? Exit strategy." I nodded, stayed quiet. But I could feel Lila watching me, waiting for me to chime in. Almost like she wanted a fight. She never liked being second best at anything, and in her mind, this dinner was her victory lap. New boyfriend, successful startup, all eyes on her. Brandon kept going, name-dropping investors, throwing around buzzwords like disruptive and scalable, like he was pitching us instead of eating turkey. At one point, He looked at me directly and asked, "What about you, Tyler? You still doing whatever it is you do?" That got a laugh. A real one this time, from multiple people. My uncle even added, "Probably suing someone for calling him boring." That one stung more than I expected. It was such a dumb line, but the way everyone chuckled made it clear they all thought the same thing. They didn't take me seriously. Not really. I tried to laugh it off. Took a sip of wine, smiled, said, "Yeah, something like that." But inside, I could feel something knotting up in my chest. The kind of tension that starts as frustration but hardens into something colder when left unchecked. Brandon kept poking, little digs about lawyers being parasites, about how real innovation happens outside courtrooms, about how the only people who sue startups are the ones who couldn't build anything themselves. Every time he said something, I looked at Lila. She never flinched, never defended me. In fact, she seemed proud of him. Eventually, I spoke up. I said, "You know, I'm happy your company's doing well, Brandon. But not every lawsuit is a cash grab. Some of us try to hold people accountable when they cross lines." My tone wasn't angry. It wasn't even sharp, just firm. But the second I said it, my mom rolled her eyes. "Tyler," she muttered, "maybe if you weren't so sensitive all the time, people wouldn't joke so much." That did it. That opened the floodgates. Because it wasn't just Brandon. It was all of them. Years of tiny cuts, framed as jokes. 1,000 unspoken expectations, and the constant reminder that no matter what I did, I'd always be the one who took things too seriously. So I shut up. I bit my tongue. I went quiet. But then Brandon, grinning and unaware, started talking about a lawsuit he'd just received. Some clown filed this bogus complaint about IP infringement, he said, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. Thinks we stole their pitch deck or something. Honestly, it's pathetic. We're not worried. My legal team's already shredding it. And in that moment, I felt something shift. Because I knew exactly what he was talking about. I was that clown. And suddenly, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I just smiled, leaned back in my chair, and said, "Huh, that's interesting. I don't usually talk shop at dinner, but I think I know that case. In fact, I think I'm the one who filed it." And that's when the laughing stopped. Brandon blinked first. It was just for a second, but I caught it, the way his smile faltered. The way his eyebrows twitched ever so slightly, like his brain was trying to reroute itself in real time. Everyone else froze too, but in different ways. Lila stopped mid-chew. My mom turned her head toward me, so slowly it felt like the room had dropped a few degrees. My uncle cleared his throat. The air was thick with something I couldn't name yet, but I could feel it humming under my skin. "You're kidding," Brandon said, still smiling, but now it was all teeth. "That's a joke, right?" I took another sip of wine, set my glass down, and shrugged. Nope. Nobody laughed this time. Brandon chuckled again, but it sounded forced now. "You're telling me you're behind that lawsuit? You what? Work for the firm representing them?" "No," I said, casually picking up a roll from the breadbasket. "I'm the one who filed it. I represent the plaintiff. My client came to me a few months ago with some pretty compelling documentation. Screenshots, emails, even timestamps from a shared pitch drive." I tore the roll in half slowly, my voice even calm. "They're claiming your company stole their concept, altered it slightly, and used it in your most recent investor deck." For a moment, it felt like nobody was breathing. Then my aunt laughed. It was sharp, uncomfortable. "Oh, come on, Tyler. It's Thanksgiving. Can we not talk about lawsuits?" And she said garbage? I ignored her. I wasn't talking to her. My eyes stayed locked on Brandon. "You remember the name Daniel Keener?" He stiffened. Just a little. Just enough for me to know I'd hit the nerve. "Wait, what is this?" Lila finally spoke, looking from me to Brandon and back again. "You're suing his company? Like in real life?" Brandon recovered quickly. "It's ridiculous," he said, waving a hand. "Some guy thinks he had the same idea we did, and now he's crying foul because we executed better. Happens all the time in tech. Doesn't mean it's valid. Tyler's just the legal guy cashing in." That stung, but I let it slide. I've dealt with worse in courtrooms. "You signed an NDA when you took that meeting," I said. "Your company did anyway. That's a binding document." Brandon scoffed. "It's vague. It's not enforceable." My smile never left. "That's what we'll find out in court." And just like that, the power shifted. He knew it. I knew it. But everyone else? They were still trying to catch up. My mom broke the silence first. "Tyler, Why would you bring this up here? What kind of person comes to a family gathering and throws a lawsuit at the dinner table? I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch under her disappointment. The kind of person who's been sitting here all night while everyone laughed at him. The kind of person who's been called sensitive for asking not to be mocked. The kind of person who's been doing his job and then finds out the guy insulting him over turkey is the same guy trying to bury evidence in a legal case. She blinked. Once. But I wasn't done. You raised me to work hard, to follow the rules, to stand up when something's wrong. But when I actually do that, suddenly I'm too much? You're okay with people tearing me down as long as they smile when they do it. Nobody said a word. I stood up, slowly, letting my napkin fall onto the plate. You want to know the worst part? I said, voice steady. I wasn't even going to bring it up. I didn't come here to rub anything in. I came because you asked. Because you said family matters. But now I'm sitting here realizing, maybe it only matters when I'm small enough to be stepped on. I turned to leave. Tyler, wait. My mom started, but I held up a hand. I'm done waiting. I walked out, coat over my shoulder, heart pounding, not from nerves, but from something colder. Resolved. I didn't slam the door behind me, didn't yell. I just left. But that wasn't the end. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I'd even had coffee. First it was a text from my mom. We need to talk. Then another from my brother Jake. Brandon's freaking out. Says you blindsided him. What's going on? Then Lila, of course. You seriously just ruined Thanksgiving for everyone. Hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. I sat with it. Let the silence grow. Because that was the breaking point, really. Not the lawsuit, not the jabs, not even the moment at dinner when I pulled the pin. The breaking point was realizing that no matter what I did, how much I achieved, how quiet I stayed, how many dinners I attended, I was never going to be seen as enough. Not unless I shrunk myself. Not unless I let people like Brandon talk over me while everyone else laughed along. That afternoon, I got a call from my firm's lead partner. Apparently, Brandon had tried to reach out through unofficial channels. Wanted to settle things personally. I told him to run it by my client. If they were open to negotiation, we'd go through the proper legal steps. No shortcuts. No favors. That's when it really hit me. He thought because we'd shared a dinner table, I'd back down. That I'd just fold up the case and pretend nothing happened. But he didn't know me. Not really. He only knew the version of me Lila probably painted for him. Quiet, awkward, the cousin who'd gotten lucky with a law degree but never really fit in with the family. The rest of the week was a blur of emails, texts, and passive-aggressive voicemails. Aunt Carol called to say I'd embarrassed Lila. Uncle Mark suggested I just let it go because what's family if not forgiveness? Even my mom tried to play mediator, saying, maybe there's a way you can work this out without making it so public. Public. That word kept echoing in my head. Because that's what they were really worried about, wasn't it? Not the truth. Not whether Brandon had actually stolen anything. They were worried people might see. See that their Golden Girls boyfriend wasn't as bulletproof as he seemed. See that maybe I wasn't the doormat they thought they could roll over. But the worst part, the part that stuck with me, that played on a loop in my head, was a message Lila sent 2 days later. You always had a problem with me getting more attention. You couldn't just let me have something good for once. You had to ruin it. That one hurt. Because for all our differences, I'd never wanted to ruin anything for her. I remembered every childhood sleepover, every dumb secret we'd sworn to keep. I remembered when she cried over not getting into her dream school, and I stayed up late helping her brainstorm alternatives. I remembered when she broke her wrist falling off a bike and begged me not to tell anyone she'd been trying to impress a boy, so I didn't. I remembered when she called me in the middle of the night because she was scared of failing her business class. And I remembered that I always showed up. But in her mind, I was the villain now. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I wouldn't stay quiet. Because I wouldn't play the part they'd assigned me. And so the silence stretched. I didn't go to Sunday dinner. Didn't respond to the group chat when Aunt Carol sent pictures of her cat in a pilgrim hat. Didn't even acknowledge the Merry Christmas text that came a month later. I was done performing. But the thing is, the story didn't end there. Because while my family tried to paint me as the problem, Brandon's company started to bleed. The legal proceedings got messy. Evidence surfaced. Emails, timestamps, investor pitches that looked eerily similar to Daniel's original proposal. Suddenly, that bogus lawsuit wasn't so easy to dismiss. And Brandon? Brandon started to unravel. But that part, that's where it gets interesting. And trust me, nobody was laughing anymore. For weeks after Thanksgiving, everything felt like static. I went through the motions, woke up, went to work, answered emails, filed motions, prepped briefs. But inside, I was on autopilot. I'd been through rough patches before. Law school was brutal. My first job out of school had nearly broken me. And there were nights early in my career when I lay on the floor of my studio apartment, just staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever feel like I belonged in the world I'd worked so hard to get into. But this was something different. Because this wasn't about work. It wasn't about money or failure or imposter syndrome. This was about my family. The people who were supposed to back me even when I stumbled. And for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something permanent. Something that wasn't coming back. I didn't get invited to the annual post-holiday brunch Aunt Carol through every January. No group selfies. No inside jokes about who spiked the orange juice too much this year. The family group chat quieted down around me, except for the occasional passive-aggressive hope everyone is doing well. That clearly wasn't meant for me. Even Jake, my brother, the one person I thought might have my back, stopped reaching out after I didn't respond to his third "you okay?" text. Rock bottom didn't come with a dramatic breakdown. It came with silence. An emptiness that followed me everywhere. I sat at home on weekends with the TV, playing shows I wasn't watching. I walked past my phone on the kitchen counter and didn't bother checking it. I stopped going to the gym. Stopped cooking for myself. Just takeout containers and deadlines and the same gray hoodie every day. And yet, somewhere in that silence, something shifted. It happened gradually. At first, I didn't even realize it. It started with a call from my client, Daniel, the guy who'd come to me months ago with that pitch deck and a desperate need for someone to believe him. He was a scrappy guy, early 30s, not a lot of connections. His startup idea wasn't flashy, but it was smart, efficient. And the more I'd looked into it, the more I'd realized just how bold Brandon's theft really was. "Hey," Daniel had said during one of our late-night calls. "I just wanted to say thanks again." Most people would have laughed me out of the room. I remembered staring at my laptop in the dark, not sure what to say. I hadn't told Daniel about the Thanksgiving mess. He didn't know the guy we were going after had insulted me in front of my whole family over sweet potato casserole. All he knew was that I was the lawyer who hadn't let him get steamrolled. "You gave me a shot," he said. "That means everything." That stuck with me. A few days later, I found myself rereading Daniel's original pitch deck. Not because I needed to, it was already etched into my memory, but because I wanted to remember what had pulled me into this fight in the first place. And as I flipped through the slides, something clicked. This case, this wasn't about Brandon. It wasn't even about Lila or my mom or anyone else sitting around that table that night. It was about truth, about standing for something when everyone else just wanted to laugh it off. So I got back to work. I started showing up at the office early, stayed late, dug deeper. I stopped thinking like someone on the defensive and started thinking like someone building something. Every motion I filed, every piece of evidence I cataloged, it was all part of a bigger picture now. A case that could make waves, not just for Daniel, but for every underdog who ever had their ideas stolen by a slick-talking fraud and loafers with no socks. At the same time, I started slowly pulling myself out of the rut I'd sunk into. I forced myself back into the gym, even if it was just 20 minutes on the treadmill. I cooked one meal from scratch a week. Then two. I deleted the group chat and muted Lila's social media. Not out of spite, just peace. I started reading again. Not legal briefs, books, stories, ideas. I even picked up a used guitar from a shop down the street. I'd always wanted to learn, and suddenly, there were no more excuses. And the weirdest thing? The quieter my life got, the better it felt. No more fake smiles. No more trying to keep the peace at my own expense. Just me, finally listening to myself. Meanwhile, the case heated up. Brandon's legal team was flailing. Every time they tried to discredit Daniel's timeline, we dropped a new bomb, metadata, emails, even a text where Brandon had accidentally forwarded part of Daniel's original pitch deck to one of his advisors. The arrogance was astonishing. I wasn't surprised when news of the lawsuit started leaking into the tech press. A few blogs ran headlines like, "Rising startup facing IP infringement lawsuit," and "Is this founder too good to be true?" Nothing major. Yet, but murmurs were growing. Then came the deposition. Brandon walked into the room like he was still on a stage. Hair gelled, watch polished, suit too tight. But underneath the swagger, I could see it, the cracks forming. He didn't expect to be grilled. He didn't expect me to be the one asking the questions. I kept my tone calm, professional. But every question was a needle, threading its way through the web he'd spun. And when I presented the slide, Daniel's original slide, that had been copied almost word for word in Brandon's investor deck, he stammered. I didn't make that slide. No, I said, tapping my pen. Your CTO did, using files from a shared drive, the same drive your company accessed after signing an NDA with Daniel Keener. You know what that's called, Brandon? He didn't answer. Infringement. He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked down. And I knew we had him. After the deposition, things moved fast. Daniel started getting calls from investors who'd originally ghosted him. We always liked the idea, they said. Just didn't know if it had legs. Now they did. Now they saw what had really happened. And suddenly, Daniel wasn't the underdog anymore. He was the guy who'd stood his ground and won. One of those investors reached out to me, said he liked how I handled myself, asked if I'd ever considered consulting full-time for venture funds, helping them vet the companies they invested in. I said I'd think about it. I started sleeping better, eating better, laughing again. And the best part? I no longer needed anyone's approval to do it. Because I'd found something stronger than validation. I'd found clarity. Clarity that I didn't know anyone's silence just because they shared my blood. Clarity that doing the right thing isn't always clean or comfortable or applauded. Clarity that sometimes, when the world around you is built on paper-thin lies and plastic smiles, being the person who tells the truth is the most radical thing you can do. And still, despite everything, part of me wondered if I'd hear from Lila. Weeks passed. Nothing. Until one night, as I was locking up the office late, I saw her name flash across my phone screen. She was calling, and I hadn't heard her voice since Thanksgiving. I stood there staring at the screen, just watching it ring. I didn't pick up, because I knew, whatever she had to say now, it wasn't going to fix anything. But I also knew something else. This wasn't the end. Not even close. Because the fallout was just beginning. And Brandon? Brandon had no idea what was coming next. The message from Lila sat in my inbox for 5 days before I opened it. Not because I was angry, I had moved past that, but because I wasn't curious anymore. There was no part of me that needed her validation, or her excuses, or even her apology. But eventually, I clicked. It was short. Cold. You blindsided me. I don't know if we can come back from this. Brandon says this is all about you being jealous and bitter. I'm trying to believe that's not true. But right now, I don't know. That was all. No, how are you? No recognition that Brandon's company was actively trying to bury a theft that could ruin someone else's life. Just you made this awkward for me. Classic Lila. And with that, something settled into place. A clarity I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. I wasn't just going to win this lawsuit anymore. I was going to bury the narrative they'd all been spinning for years. The one where I was the odd one out, the too sensitive cousin, the one who didn't know how to have a sense of humor. I was going to pull the mask off Brandon's smug little startup and expose everything they'd stolen, everything they lied about to investors, partners, even the media. And I wasn't going to do it for revenge. I was going to do it because it was right. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel a little personal. Because now I had something Brandon didn't. I had receipts. The first thing I did was dig deeper. We already had a strong case with the email chains and the metadata. Brandon's team had been sloppy, and we'd caught them red-handed lifting core slides from Daniel's deck. But I wanted more. I wanted to know just how far the rot went. So I started poking around. I had a contact, Jules, someone I'd worked with during a consulting gig the year before. She used to be on the due diligence team for a mid-sized VC fund. Smart, discreet, and with access to all kinds of private investor networks. When I explained the situation, she didn't hesitate. "Oh, that company," she said with a dry laugh. "Yeah, they've been making waves in all the worst ways. A couple of us have been wondering how long it would take before someone called them out." Jules gave me access to an internal investor forum where anonymous chatter about shady deals and questionable startups was the norm. And sure enough, buried in a thread from 2 months ago was a gem. Heard from someone inside LaunchBridge that Brando Tech fudged their monthly active users last quarter. Inflated numbers to close Series B. NDA'd the analyst who caught it. LaunchBridge was one of Brandon's early investors. And if there was even a whisper of number fudging on a funding round, that was a bomb waiting to go off. I flagged it. Next, I started compiling everything public. Interviews Brandon had given, blog posts his company published, a podcast episode where he described how he'd come up with the idea in the shower after a particularly intense run. Funny, considering Daniel had timestamps on his Google Drive from nearly 6 months before that. Every quote, every soundbite, every puffed-up PR post became another brick in the wall I was building. Then came the biggest surprise. Daniel called me one morning and said, "Hey, I just got a weird message on LinkedIn. Some guy who used to work at Brando Tech. Says he's got documents. Is it real?" I asked. "Seems like it. He says he left on bad terms, but he saw what they did to me and doesn't think it's right." His name was Marcus, former junior product manager, and he had an entire email chain where Brandon and his CTO discussed reworking Daniel's slides to fit the new narrative. Not only that, there were internal memos where Brandon bragged about how nobody will come after us. The kid doesn't have the money for a lawyer. I read that line 4 times. The kid doesn't have the money. Brandon thought this was just another easy theft, that he could steal, scale, and skip town before anyone noticed. What he didn't count on was the kid finding someone who knew exactly how to play the long game. Now I had evidence. Now I had motive. Now I needed an opportunity. The legal case was proceeding exactly as expected. Brandon's lawyers were doing their best to stall, delay, deny, but momentum was shifting. Every discovery motion we filed uncovered something new. And yet, as airtight as the case was becoming, I knew the courtroom wouldn't be enough. Because even if we won, even if the court awarded Daniel damages, Brandon would still be able to spin it. He'd blame a disgruntled former employee. He'd call it a misunderstanding. He'd settle, disappear for 6 months, and rebrand under a new name. Unless we went public. But I couldn't leak anything while discovery was ongoing. It could jeopardize the case. So instead, I focused on building a shadow dossier. A separate, non-legal version of everything we knew. The story, the timeline, the fraud, the stolen idea, the arrogance, all of it. I shared it with Daniel. "What is this?" he asked. "It's your future profile piece," I said. "For when this is over. When you're the guy who took on a dirty startup and won." He laughed, nervously. "You think anyone will care?" "They'll care," I said. "Trust me." Because I'd seen this before. The tech world loves underdogs, especially ones who punch up and win. And Brandon? He was practically begging for a fall from grace. I looped Jules in again. She helped me quietly circulate pieces of the dossier through trusted channels. Just enough to get people talking. No leaks. Just whispers. Just questions. Did Brando Tech steal their core product? Why did Launchbridge back out of their Series C? Is Brandon really who he says he is? The pressure started to mount. And while all of that was happening, I prepared the final piece. The conference. TechWest was the biggest startup conference on the West Coast. Thousands of investors, founders, journalists, and consultants, all under one roof. Brandon had been invited to speak on a panel titled Scaling with Integrity: How to Lead in the Modern Era. The irony wasn't lost on me. I reached out to the organizers through a contact of mine and secured a last-minute guest speaker slot for Daniel in a smaller, but still heavily attended, startup founder session. Nothing flashy, just a 10-minute talk on ethical funding and IP protection. But it would be enough. Enough to plant the story. Enough to let people see him. And when they did, when they started connecting the dots between Daniel's story and the lawsuit headlines and the sudden retreat of Brando Tech's funding, the truth would hit like a hammer. The final move came 1 week before the conference. Brandon's company issued a quiet press release announcing strategic restructuring and refocusing product development. It was corporate speak for panic mode. A few investors started pulling out. Their CTO abruptly stepped down. The writing was on the wall, but Brandon still didn't see it. Still thought he could bluff his way through. I got a call that same night, from my mother, of all people. "I heard you're still going after Brandon," she said, voice tight. "Do you really think this is the best way to handle things?" I paused. "Yes, I do. You've made things really hard for Lila. People are talking. She's humiliated." "Lila chose to humiliate herself," I said calmly, "by standing next to someone who steals and lies and treats everyone else like they're beneath him. That's not on me." Silence. Then, quietly, "I don't recognize you anymore." I smiled to myself. "Good," I said. "That means I'm finally doing something right." And so the stage was set. Brandon would walk onto that conference panel in a tailored suit and flash his best smile. Daniel would quietly tell his story 2 rooms away. And by the time the weekend was over, everyone would know. The theft, the arrogance, the lies. This wasn't just about a lawsuit anymore. This was about legacy, and I was going to make sure the truth had the final word. The first day of Tech West arrived like the slow, steady inhale before a punch. The city buzzed with rented Teslas, clacking badge lanyards, and overpriced cold brew. A sea of aspiring founders and freshly minted VCs flooded the downtown convention center, all elbowing their way toward whatever disruption smelled most like the next unicorn. I'd been to Tech West twice before, but this year felt different. This year, I wasn't just another suit in the crowd. I was the guy holding the match. Brandon's panel was set for Saturday afternoon, Scaling with Integrity. That title still made me laugh. Hosted on the main stage, it was prime real estate. Dozens of cameras, tech bloggers in the front row, all the big names in venture peeking in from the back. Brandon was billed as the headliner. His headshot, smiling, jawline clenched, hand on chin like he'd just invented clean water, was plastered across the promo banners like he was the second coming of Jobs. Daniel's slot came 2 hours before, in room B12. Smaller, quieter. No stage lights. No camera crew. Just a low podium, some plastic chairs, and a crowd of maybe 60 early-stage founders there to learn about avoiding legal traps. He almost didn't show. "I don't know if I can do this," he told me that morning. We were seated on a bench outside the venue, both of us sipping lukewarm coffee in silence. "You don't have to give a TED Talk," I said. "You just have to tell the truth. The rest will take care of itself." He nodded. "Then, he's going to be in the same building as me. That's so insane." I looked at him. "And by tonight, he's going to wish he wasn't." Daniel's talk started quietly. A few people trickled in, then a few more. By minute 10, the room was full. He didn't start with drama. No theatrics. Just a steady voice and a story. I came up with a platform to help small businesses connect with micro-investors. I pitched it. I got a few meetings. One of them was with Brando Tech. He didn't use Brandon's name directly, which was smart. But the room was already buzzing. They signed an NDA. We shared documents. They passed. Pause. A few months later, I saw my deck, with a new logo, being presented at a startup showcase. Word for word. Slide for slide. The audience was silent now. No laptops open. No side conversations. Just eyes locked forward. I thought about walking away. But someone said to me, "Theft doesn't become innovation just because the thief gets venture funding." That someone had been me. He didn't say that part. He didn't need to. He ended the talk with one line. "Don't let fear of being difficult keep you from being right." The applause started slow, then rolled into a standing ovation. And right there, in that plain conference room with cheap carpet and humming fluorescent lights, I knew we'd won the crowd. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Brandon walked onto the main stage 2 hours later like he was still king, flanked by 2 other CEOs and a moderator who clearly worshipped the ground he walked on. He launched straight into his usual monologue. "At Brando Tech, we believe in integrity, innovation, and scaling with purpose." The irony nearly made me choke. I was standing in the back, blending into the crowd, just another nameless attendee. But I wasn't alone. Jules was there too. Daniel sat beside her, hood up, eyes sharp. We weren't here to heckle. We didn't need to. Because the real revenge was already in motion. 2 hours before Brandon's panel, I had quietly uploaded our legal filing to a public case database, something anyone could access with the right link. Then, Jules had sent that link, along with our meticulously curated dossier of quotes, timestamps, slide comparisons, and email chains, to 3 specific people. A mid-tier tech blogger known for exposés, a well-respected VC journalist covering startup accountability, a rising tech influencer on TikTok with 500,000 followers and a love for drama. The story exploded. It started as a whisper in the back rows during Brandon's talk, phones buzzing, screens lighting up with alerts. Then came the murmurs. People checking the article, scrolling, whispering to each other. By the time Brandon was answering his 3rd softball question about what makes a founder trustworthy, the first journalist had tweeted, "Police Garlight developing. Lawsuit reveals Brando Tech may have stolen core IP from a smaller startup after signing NDA. Founder Brandon Price named directly. Full story dropping in 10. The moderator blinked. looked down at his phone, then back up. One of the panelists shifted uncomfortably. Brandon kept talking, but he could feel it. The silence in the room wasn't admiration, it was tension. The polite, sharp-edged kind that came when everyone knew something you didn't. Then came the TikTok. Just under 2 minutes. Side-by-side comparison of Daniel's deck and Brandon's. Circling text. Zooming in on the email thread where Brandon wrote, "The kid doesn't have the money to do anything." It was already at 20K likes by the time the panel ended. Brandon stepped off stage to a swarm of cameras. But this time, no one was asking about his roadmap. They were asking about the lawsuit, about the emails, about the stolen pitch. He tried to laugh it off. Said, "It's all a misunderstanding. We're confident in our position." But his voice cracked. I watched from across the lobby as he grabbed Lila's arm, pulling her aside, face twisted in panic. Her mouth was a tight line, arms crossed. She was already checking her phone, reading what the world now knew. She didn't look like someone defending her boyfriend. She looked like someone realizing she had backed the wrong horse. Within 48 hours, the fallout began. Brando Tech's LinkedIn page went dark. LaunchBridge issued a statement that they were pausing all support, pending investigation. 2 of their advisors resigned. Then came the emails from reporters. The ones I wanted. A long-form piece went live a week later. David versus Goliath. How a scrappy startup took on a Silicon Valley darling and won. It didn't name me directly. I was fine with that. But Daniel's story became a symbol of standing your ground. Within a month, Daniel closed a new round of funding. Clean money. Real investors. He renamed the company. He moved into a proper office. And he asked me to be his permanent legal advisor. I said yes. Brandon, on the other hand, disappeared from social media. The last thing anyone heard, he was being pushed out by what remained of his board. The startup world moved on without him, like it always does. One day, he was a visionary. The next, just another cautionary tale. As for Lila, she sent me another message. This one was different. I didn't know the full story. I was wrong. I should have listened. I'm sorry. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to anymore. The silence wasn't bitter now. It was peace. Months later, I stood in Daniel's new office, watching a fresh team of developers work around whiteboards and screens. "You still thinking about the trial?" he asked me. I shook my head. "No. I'm thinking about how many times I almost didn't show up." He looked over. "Glad you did." So was I? Because in the end, revenge wasn't the court ruling or the headlines. It was becoming the kind of man who didn't flinch anymore, who knew his worth, who didn't shrink to make others comfortable. The man they underestimated, again and again, until he burned the mask they made for him, and never looked back. I didn't just win the case. I buried the lie.
In the comfort of my home instead of office. That's fair. I don't have that option. Hi, Nanny. 9:30. How are you? I'm good. I'm just cooking. I'm just doing some work right now with the stream on. Okay. Everyone doing work. Oh my goodness. Isn't kind of late, guys? Why are we still doing work at this time? Hi, Vamira. Okay, guys, this actually tastes pretty good. Yummy, look. But I did make a mess, so I'm gonna have to clean it all up. I made a mess, guys. I'm gonna have to clean the stove area up a little bit.